So again, welcome everybody. Um, the presentation today is on supporting children and play. If you want to just take notes over what we're going to go over, that's fine. If you just want to listen, that's fine also. But just some really good information to kind of help you out in the classroom. So we're going to go ahead and get started. From time to time, our parents will ask us, questions like, all my child ever does here is play. When are you going to start teaching them something? We know, and we've talked about quite often that children learn best through play. They learn best through hands-on material, and especially when it comes to social development and children learning cooperation and learning to form friendships. Play is the perfect setting for these relationships to bloom and to blossom. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is not only the power of play and everything that a child learns while they are playing, but also how we can support children in play and support their social development. All right. So let's kind of start off, and I'm going to go through all types of different activities that go on in the classroom on a daily basis and kind of elaborate on each one of them. So the first thing we have right here is when children play in the block center, playing with blocks, cars, and trucks. Of course, they're learning the concept of shape, size, length, and location, all that are related to reading and to math skills. Patterns to create and repeat patterns, which again is a math skill. Great time for them to exercise their imagination. We talked about this when we did functional area creative a few weeks ago, that this is a great time to bring out that imagination, for them to express their ideas. This is a great opportunity for the social development to come in when we talk about children who are looking at other individuals to try to find something that they relate to, something that they have in common, that will help support that social development, expressing their ideas and to cooperate with each other and to problem solve is all going to help with that relatedness that children will find with one another. Also, I throw in there, about the properties of wood, which you can go into science with that one right there. Feeling the wood and talking about the wood is going to help enhance your language development. And again, that's going to spark conversations with children. And also to see themselves in a different perspective. That at this they're the giant, rather than the adult always looking down at the child and the child's always having to look up at the adult. When they're in the block center, they get to be that giant. When they're the giant, it's going to build their self-confidence. When their self-confidence is up, it's going to help with that pro-social development and being able to communicate and cooperate with one another. All right. Stringing beads is another great activity that we can do to support children in play and to support their social development. Also, you're learning eye-hand coordination right here, the concept of color, shape, location, number and proportion concepts such as more, less, longer, shorter. And once again, incredible conversations that children will have with one another when talking about the proportion concepts. Again, the patterns and sequences, which is a math skill. And then finally, the pride and accomplishment. When we are supporting children in this type of play, encouraging the children to accomplish what they are, the stringing of the beads and creating the patterns, is going to be very important for the early educators. An accomplishment is also going to help with the pro-social behavior as well. All right. Playing with puzzles, and this is kind of a tough one right here because typically when children play with puzzles, it's an independent activity. They do it by themselves, but you can also have that cooperation with two people with your support. Now, this is something that you're going to have to coach and mentor. We don't want putting a puzzle together to become a competition. All right. But again, we're learning about the relationships between a part to a whole, which is a basic math concept. You're getting your eye-hand coordination with the small puzzle pieces, or if you're using the puzzle pieces that have the peg on it. Once again, the vocabulary is coming out right here, the problem solving. Really awesome thing about puzzles that a lot of people don't realize how powerful they are is about the negative and positive space. Seeing something against a background, which again is essential for math and reading skills, all right? The self-confidence that children have whenever they can put together a more difficult puzzle. And the other thing I like is when you do have children that are working together to complete a puzzle, that pride and accomplishment when they can do it together, and the friendship that is formed, and the trust and respect that is formed with one another whenever they are able to do that. Okay. Like I said, the independence as they use puzzles without help, and then the sorting of the puzzle pieces once they get all mixed together. Kind of off the subject right here, you know, puzzles are really awesome because, of course, we can put it together and it's great for problem solving. But then also when you can turn it into an incredible sorting activity, trying to find like pieces. And usually whenever I bring a brand new puzzle into a classroom, before I present it to the children, you know, I'll flip the pieces over and put colored dots on the back, whether they're all red or they're all green, you know, so that way if the puzzle pieces get mixed together with other puzzles, you can sort it out and be able to keep those, you know, find out which pieces go to which puzzle. That's for some of your older age groups that you have more of the jigsaw puzzles. In your younger classroom where you have the wooden puzzles, pretty easy to figure those out, but you can still turn it into a great sorting activity by putting those colored stickers or using a marker and putting that on there. Okay, just makes life easier. Cooking projects is a great way to support social development with children. Whenever you can do this in small group activities, of course, you're also learning about nutrition, taste, the different food groups, how heat and cold changes things, which is really fantastic. When you get some dough, like when you're making bread or something, and it's real doughy, it's kind of like Play-Doh, you know. And then you put it in the oven and you bake it and it comes out as bread. You know, that is fascinating to the children, and some incredible conversations that you can pull out of that, again, to support that social development. Great opportunity to introduce volume and measurement in a real way. I know that a lot of you will use the water table to introduce volume and measurement. Which is awesome, but it's not really applicable. So in a cooking project, they really understand the meaning behind this. All right. Great time for you to introduce new vocabulary to the children. And of course, anytime you introduce new vocabulary to the children, make sure that they are repeating or making an attempt to repeat the new vocabulary, especially those of you that are in some of the younger classrooms, the infant toddler classrooms. Even though you know they're not going to be able to repeat the words, still encourage that attempt, you know, and you'll be surprised. One day they're just going to throw it out there. All right, again, the relationship between the part and the whole, and in the awareness of their cultures. Again, going back to social development and supporting children with their social development, you know, comparing cultures and finding like cultures and similarities between cultures is imperative when it comes to social development. So you want to pay attention to that. Water, when children are playing at the water table or in, you know, during splash time. Summer is almost here, so it's almost that splash time. I love it, you know, that some things sink and some things float. All right, great learning opportunity and incredible conversations that will come up right there. And you know, the whole point behind all of this is what type of conversations can I initiate and create. And especially if it's a child-initiated conversation, that you can present an activity to the class that will encourage the children to initiate a conversation, that's golden right there. Of course, you're there to do an adult-initiated conversation if the child doesn't do it, but the main goal is for them to initiate the conversations, all right? To observe changes as water takes on different forms. So I love when I do a water table, not just putting regular tap water into the water table, but maybe getting ice cubes and putting ice or a bag of ice in a water table one morning and letting children play in the ice. The conversation and the excitement and the giggles is really fantastic. And again, you're supporting that social development once again. And to let the ice sit in the water table throughout the morning, and then when the kids go down for nap and they wake up, what happened to the ice? It melted and it's turned to water. That creates an incredible conversation right there. And then maybe the next day or a couple of days later, putting warm water in there. Don't make it too hot. We don't want to scald, or burn their hands, but putting it warm enough that it's tolerable, that creates a whole lot of different conversations, and the imagination and creativity is really cool right there. This is actually really great when you're working with potty trainers and children that are getting close to potty training. Before you can teach a child how to potty train, they've got to be both physically and emotionally ready. And one of the things that they have to be ready for is, can they tell the difference between wet and dry, clean and dirty? These are words that we just assume children know what they mean, but sometimes they don't. And if the child doesn't understand the difference between wet and dry or clean and dirty, then they're not ready to potty train. So introducing them to a water table is a great way to teach these words and actually teach the meaning of these words. So it's an important skill right there for that. Sorry. Water, it makes it real bubbly and everything. And of course, the eye-hand coordination, the concept of empty and full, volume and weight, that's always fun stuff right there. All right. Painting at the art easel, of course, when we talk about creativity, when we talk about expression, when we talk about social development, nothing is better than the art easel. This is the opportunity child to really express themselves, especially when you have a child that's dealing with their emotions, when a child that's dealing with their self-worth. The art easel is a great way to coach this out of them. Of course, it's going to help them develop their imagination and creativity, their eye-hand coordination, different names of colors. What happens whenever you mix colors, which will create some child-initiated conversations, distinguish shapes and patterns, and purposely create new shapes right there. This is a really good one to notice patterns from a background, which is necessary for learning to read. And what I like about this one on an art easel, rather than just a standard piece of paper or piece of construction paper that you put down for the child, is you've got to remember that with a piece of construction paper or just scratch paper, you're talking about an 8x10 sheet of paper in most cases that you're trying to teach the patterns from a background. And depending on the age of the child, if you're dealing with a young 2-year-old child, their vision is still developing on what they can see right there. So when you're using an art easel, you have a much larger background for them to notice those patterns, okay? So that's where that is related right there. So, and we've already talked about the younger the child, the bigger you want your platform, okay? A great time for them to express their feelings, their ideas, their values. Again, relationships of space and size. So you can talk about bigger and smaller, longer and shorter. And of course, symmetry, balance, and design, okay, is all important for an art easel. If you pair two children up together and have them paint on one art easel, this is going to support social development right here. Or if you have one of the art easels that is like an A-frame that you have a child on each side of it, you can do some really creative games where children talk about what they're painting and try to match each other, or do what I'm doing without looking at the art easel. And this is fantastic for social development right there. Kind of a Simon Says or follow my lead type of thing between the two children on each sides of the A-frame. So some cool stuff right there. Finger painting along the same lines. The difference between the finger paint and the art easel, the finger paint is on the table. They're actually using their fingers rather than brushes. So it's a great sensory related activity. It's a great time to teach that cooperation and the spatial awareness, because we don't want to get too close to one another because we're going to get the paint on each other. And sometimes, though, depending on your activity, that might be encouraged, all right? But you're definitely going to get some social interaction at that point, all right? Of course, right here to exercise our imagination and creativity. And again, we want the child to initiate the conversation rather than just putting it down on paper. Let's get them to talk about it and talk about what they're doing. How colors mix with each other, once again, the concept of shape, size, and location, the eye-hand coordination. This is one of my favorite things about finger painting, is that it is an acceptable way to make a mess. We talked about this when we went over creativity, that we want to provide space and time for an appropriate mess, because it's going to allow them to express themselves more. You're not putting a limit on it, all right? And let me just, I'm gonna make up a new word here. Managed mess. Okay, a managed mess, or a controlled mess. And of course, finger painting is a fun way of sharing ideas with others who are near, which is definitely going to support our social development and support the children in their play. Just to expand on finger painting, sometimes I like to get the butcher paper and put it down on the floor, and rather than doing finger painting, have them do toe painting, and paint with their toes. Kind of something different right there. You want to be kind of right there holding them to keep them from falling down, but the kids absolutely love this. They think it's hilarious. They come up with some really cool stuff. All right. Collage material, or paste, glue, and collage material, you know, good stuff right here. Again, their imagination and creativity is coming out. The more we can get them to express their imagination and creativity, the more social development opportunities you're going to have. All right. Once again, we have those reading skills with shape, size, location, and design. Great time to teach about some things are sticky, some things are smooth. Some things come off of you really easy, some things don't. Talk about the different textures that different things have. And again, you've got your patterns and designs, and patterns from a background. Now, when I talk about this one right here, you know, I do like to throw caution out there that if you do have a child that has signs and symptoms related to or similar to or autism, this particular activity might throw them off. It might discourage them. Typically, a very sensory related activity like this, sometimes it really kind of blows their mind. So you want to ease them into this, all right? Ease them into it. But it's a great opportunity to increase that self-esteem and that self-confidence, which is needed before you can start the pro-social development, all right? Musical instruments and rhythm instruments. We've talked about this a few times in a couple of other webinars, but please make sure that these stay out and available to the children. They need this. A lot of times teachers will put these items away in a closet or in a shelf because they don't want to manage it. All right, but it's got to be something that's managed, but it's so incredible, and especially when it comes to supporting children in play and supporting their social development. Being aware and conscious of music, being able to teach them fast, slow, loud, soft, to express themselves in a new way. And I know earlier we talked about finding different activities or things in the classroom that children can relate to, that they have a common interest, and music is a great way to find those common interests and the relatedness with one another. Okay, so it's cool stuff. The auditory discrimination, which is necessary for learning to read. A lot of people kind of forget about that one, so music is essential right there, and to interpret the different signals and cues. So don't put those musical instruments away. Look at all this incredible stuff that we can teach the children. All right. Buy some Advil. All right, you'll get over it. All right, so for Advil for you, not for the children. Playing with scissors. All right, again, we got the small muscle development in the hand. These are called pincer movements right here, that we talked about with small muscle development. Scissors are a great way to teach that. The concept of shape, size, color, and location, and the imagination and creativity. Now, again, we're going to talk about the spatial awareness that is essential for social development. We don't want the children cutting on each other, their hair, their other supplies, those type of things. So the cooperation and empathy has to be taught right here with the scissors. Dancing is amazing when it comes to supporting children in play and supporting their social development. Nothing brings people together better than dancing. All right, dancing and music. It's a great way for them to express themselves physically, to be conscious of the moods and the rhythms of music. Of course, balance and coordination is going to come in right here because most of our children will fall down when they dance. Some of us adults fall down when we dance, all right? But again, it's such an incredible way to bring out that social development in the child. I just cannot stress that enough right there. Good stuff. Climbing equipment. Again, that creativity is going to blossom. That imagination is going to blossom right here. When children climb on stuff, they create scenarios. They become somebody else. And especially when we're talking about dramatic play, this is really key. Now, remember that climbing is the third way children learn. All right, the third way children learn. And so those of you that are in a older toddler room, 2-year-old room, 3-year-old room, if you do not give your children appropriate equipment to climb on, they will find their own way or their own equipment to climb on. So this is when you find them climbing on chairs, climbing on tables, climbing on shelves. It's because they have nothing else to climb on that is appropriate. Okay, so set them up for success and give them age-appropriate equipment to climb on, so that they can get this impulse out. All right. But again, the cooperation with others when involved in dramatic play is awesome for social development. The self-confidence, any of y'all that have ever worked in a toddler 2-year-old classroom, you know exactly what this is. When that child gets to the top of the table and they are king of the mountain, they are so happy and they're so confident. And then we take them down and, they get kind of, so they get right back up there. So again, find them the appropriate equipment to climb on. Physical strength, coordination, and balance. We don't think about the importance of physical strength developing physical strength in our young children, but that's very important right there. We don't want our children to be weak. And just like adults, you have to work out. You got to practice that. So that's important for our kids right there. Use their imagination, help them solve those problems. All right. Home center, again, nothing will, this is right up there with dancing when we talk about the importance of building social skills, forming those friendships, collaborating with one another, communicating with one another. This is another one of those opportunities that, it's endless right here, totally endless, that you can create scenarios to support the children in this play, and the social development is just going to blossom. Home center is amazing. You've got a lot of flexibility with their thinking at this point. Ability to. Have you ever noticed this? This is so funny that you have children in your classroom that will have a hard time expressing themselves or talking in a complete sentence. You get maybe 2-3 word sentences out of them until they go to the home center. And when they go to the home center and they start pretending to be the parent, they start pretending to be the role model, the teacher, and they start talking as if they are this person, suddenly they're talking in complete sentences. It's so funny because you're like, why can't you do this the rest of the time? But it takes them pretending to be someone else to get those complete sentences out. Make sure that you recognize this. Make sure that you praise this. I'm so happy that you're full sentence. That's so awesome because it's going to help encourage it in everyday situations. So it's pretty cool. Remember that normally when children play in the home center or dramatic play, the three most popular adult roles are dad and teacher. They love to pretend to be us. And how many times have y'all seen a kid pretend to be you? And it's kind of funny because you're like, I don't talk like that. I don't sound like that. Normally the kids get it down pretty well. So we learned about our classroom management style by watching the children imitate you. It's pretty cool. Great problem-solving opportunities in the home center, negotiation opportunities with their friends. It's great. Like I said, such an incredible opportunity for social development. Organizing and sorting things as you ask them to help clean up the home center and maintain it. All right, so great things going on there. You're going to see them make decisions in here. The improvising that goes on in the home center is really awesome too. The abstract thinking that goes on. What I really love about home center, and I'm going to go back to something that I say quite often in my trainings, that you have to reach them before you can teach them. You've got to get to know the child's beliefs and values so that you can help that child and meet their unmet needs. The home center is a great opportunity for all of that to take place. Because what you'll notice is when a child is playing in the home center, they're going to act out real life situations that are going on in their life, situations that they sometimes won't talk about, but they're going to act these out in home center and dramatic play. Now, what you really want to look for here is that not only are they going to act these out, but they're also going to act out how they would like for them to be resolved, which is pretty awesome. Okay, so for you, the teacher, lots of observing and assessing that needs to be going on when children are playing in home center and dramatic play. All right. Again, carrying out their ideas, cooperating with others, and their imagination and creativity run wild in here. Puppets, I know that I commented on a couple of your worksheets back a few functional areas ago. There were a few of y'all that talked about the puppets that you use in your classroom. and I was just clapping and cheering the whole time I was reading those. High five to those of you that are still using puppets in your classroom. It's one of those old-fashioned techniques that are it's still so amazing, but a lot of people just aren't doing it anymore. Um, get those back out. You know, we need to bring these back into style, all right, somehow, some way. But they're awesome. Puppets are a great way to express ideas with words, to take on the role of someone else, to communicate with voice tones as well with words, to use your imagination. And I love it because there's something about putting a puppet on your hand and holding it over your head that children will start talking in different tones, usually in a high-pitched tone. I don't know what it is, but it's so hilarious, but it's so awesome. You want to recognize that. You want to encourage that. You want to show appreciation for that. But puppets are also great supporting children in play and supporting their social development, especially when you've got two children that are having a conflict with one another. Putting on puppets and reenacting the situation is a great way to support those social skills. What I usually like to do, like when I was a pre-K teacher, I used to make puppets. Me and the children would make puppets. Every child had a puppet, but I would take a picture of the child's face and cut it out, and then we would hot glue the child's face onto a sock puppet. So there was a puppet for every single child in the classroom, and we would do different things with them, especially during circle time and everything. But again, especially if I was having a conflict with two children, and I wanted them to reenact what happened, but instead of Johnny getting Johnny's puppet and Mark getting Mark's puppet, Mark would take Johnny's puppet and Johnny would take Mark's puppet, and they would play each other. And it was a great way to resolve the conflicts. Usually halfway through, they're giggling and laughing, and they don't even remember what they got into a fight over. But again, incredible way to support that social development right there. So good stuff. Sand is one of my all-time favorites right here too, with children playing in the sand. So much great stuff here. The imagination is coming out, the size, shape, and volume. To distinguish between empty and full. I always like to get like a big glass jar and ask the children, is this empty or full? They're going to say it's empty. So then I'll fill it up with large rocks and then ask them, is it empty or full? And they're going to say, it's full. No, hang on just a second. And then pour sand into it and then ask them, pour sand over the rocks. And then ask them, is it empty or full? They're going to scream, it's full. Hang on just a second, and then getting a pitcher of water and pouring water on top of the sand. And the kids are just, their minds are blown. And now, is it empty or full? It's full now. But again, it's really going to help them with, just kind of discovering that, looks can be deceiving, and it's really not full, and that creates a lot of good conversations. How to use tools, how to solve problems, the difference between cool, wet, light, kind of going back to those potty training skills once again. There's your social development. Their children love to interact with one another when they're playing in the sand, especially when the creativity and the imagination comes out. Cool stuff. We can create systems for classifying, ordering, and arranging in the sand area. The patterns and symbols, and to observe change, the science skill is coming out with the sand as well. So lots of opportunities. Now remember, if you have a sandbox out on the playground, make sure that you rake that daily. A lot of times our neighborhood animals like to get into our sandbox and leave us prizes. And we want to make sure our children don't get their hands on that. All right. Science Center is another great one. This is a learning that I encourage you to have in all classrooms, infants, toddlers, preschool, pre-K, school age. It tends to get skipped quite often. But we want to make sure that science is in there. There's a lot of early educators that have a hard time with the Science Center, so that's why it's normally taken away. This is where I'm going to go back to, you got to confront your fears. You got to take on these challenges that you struggle with. All right. Again, you got a lot of vocabulary coming out right here. The concept of texture, color, weight, size, the categories, the likenesses, the differences, to appreciate nature and to create that sense of wonder. And because there's so much fascination that goes on in the Science Center, when the child is emotionally hijacked in a positive way and they're fascinated by things that are going on, great opportunity to form that social development and to form those friendships right there. I think a lot of y'all would agree that it's easier to form a friendship when you're excited and happy, rather than when you're down and angry or negative or anxious. So we want to keep that excitement level up. It's going to help support the children in their social development. Play-Doh and clay, one of our all-time favorites, and I always recommend homemade Play-Doh rather than the store-bought stuff, just because you kind of get a double whammy out of it. You've got a great activity with the children making the Play-Doh, and of course the end result, what they do with the Play-Doh after it's made. So you get the best of both worlds right there. Kind of just like the art easel, we talked about the shape against the pattern, or the shape against the background, which is a reading skill. Now again, this is very sensory related, so it's going to really get the job done. Concept of shapes and relative sizes. So again, the big, small, length, height. You can get the ball of Play-Doh and talk about how much Play-Doh you have, and then roll it out with the rolling pin. Now, do I have more or less Play-Doh? The kids are usually going to say you have more because it's longer, but then no, you still have the same amount of Play-Doh. It just is in a different form. So some great conversations that you can have there to support them in play. The negative space that is created whenever you do the cookie cutter and then it's taken away. And again, this is a reading opportunity or reading skill that has to be mastered. Children that are struggling with self-regulation, give them something appropriate for them to squeeze and to pound on. So the Play-Doh is great for these opportunities. They've got to get that impulse out, all right? They've got to be able to regulate that. So, give them something appropriate, all right? The imagination, the creativity, and then, of course, the amount of substance that remains the same even when the shape changes like we just talked about. All right. Writing toys is another incredible social opportunity that you can support children with. Strength, balance, and coordination of large muscles, which we need, and we've got to give children the opportunity to use their large muscles. It's a great way for them to use their energy in a constructive way. Great time to talk about the concept of speed, direction, and location. So set up those little obstacle courses on your playground so that they're not just randomly, riding the tricycles. They actually have some place to go and directions to follow. Depending on what age group you're working with, the best way I like to describe it is one direction per age group is what the child can follow. So if you're in a toddler classroom, you're going to give them a one-step direction. Go sit on the tricycle. That's all they're going to be able to follow. If you're in a 2-year-old classroom, then go sit on the tricycle and push it forward. All right, so that's a 2-step direction. 3-year-old classroom, go sit on the tricycle, push it forward, and go around the cone. So that's a 3-step direction. So 1 step per age group is typically what we want to look at. All right. The imagination that comes out right here is awesome. To negotiate and take turns. So that's definitely going to support our social development, solving problems, and again, the self-confidence that comes out of this. All right. Books we talk about quite often, and we've got a functional area coming up that we're going to talk a lot about books. We've already had one big conversation about it. We got one more to come up. Um, but again, learning that it is enjoyable to read, to hear these different stories, that those little bitty black things on the page actually mean something. They're letters, all right? They're words. It's talk written down, to teach that skill right there, the meaning of more and more words. So those of you that are in a pre-K classroom, your word wall gets bigger and bigger and bigger when you're reading stories. In your infant toddler rooms, it's a great way for that language and literacy to come out. Ways for that you can express your thoughts, feelings, and ideas better. Remember, all of the books in your classroom need to be related to a particular child and things that they are going through in their life. That's what I like to recommend. All right, to interpret the pictures, to listen to the spoken word. I always like to stop halfway through a book and then have the kids complete the story. All right, use their own imagination to complete that story. It's really cool. We've got to teach the children the appropriate way to handle books, that we handle them with care. Talk about the importance of illustration. Now, again, I always prefer real life pictures over any cartoony type illustration because that's what the brain is going to connect to. All right. So, the more books you can find to have real life pictures, the better off they are. All right. To recognize certain words when you see them in print, the more complex language patterns in speech, and to follow a plot. All right. When we're participating in circle time, incredible social opportunities right here. This is where you have the control to manipulate the conversations. This is when you've got the opportunity to manipulate social development. Everything else in the classroom is kind of half and half between teacher initiated and child initiated. Circle time, you've kind of got the ball, all right? But you can encourage the children to add their ideas to discussion. You're going to value and appreciate their ideas that they contribute, all right? But this is when we teach children empathy and acts of service, that we wait before we start talking. We don't talk over each other, that we listen to one another. So great cooperation, which is a big social skill right there. Of course, the vocabulary, remembering words to songs and poems, learning the names of each other. Incredible social opportunity right there. The cooperation and to help plan. I always like to do what's called plan, do, review in circle time. So we'll sit there with the children. In the morning time, we're going to talk about what we're going to do during the day. Then we're going to do it. And at the end of the day, we're going to talk about everything that we did. Okay. This is what's called a high scope approach to classroom management, but it's a plan, do, review concept. It's really good. All right. Sorting things, again, we're going to notice details, likenesses, differences in objects. We're going to help form categories when we sort things, the concept of color, size, and shape, the numerical concept of more or less, and then logical reasoning. Now, I want to throw caution when it comes to social development and supporting children in play when it comes to sorting things. Sometimes when we make sorting things too exciting, and normally we want to make things exciting because we want to engage the children, right? But sometimes if sorting is too exciting, then they start sorting everything in the classroom on their own, and then they start sorting one another. and then they start stereotyping one another, and that could, lead into some discrimination type situations. It's like, okay, all the kids with blonde hair go over here, all the kids with dark hair go over here, and then it's going to go to light skin, dark skin, then it's going to go to, and again, we want to stay away from those type of situations because that can hinder the social development instead of supporting it. So y'all have got to make sure that you pay close attention to this when you're doing sorting activities, because the children will take it upon themselves to start sorting other things, mainly one another. And so we want to be able to teach that, whenever that time comes, that, that's not something we sort out. All right. Singing songs, right up here with dancing and home center, when I talk about some of the most important ways to support children in play and so to support their social development, singing songs together is a great way to build that companionship. Again, we've got the principles of music and rhythm, the vocabulary that comes out of songs, memory skills, sequencing, to be aware of one another, the auditory discrimination, the concepts that we use in songs, and again, the awareness and identification with their culture and their heritage. Some incredible social skills that are going on right here, to help support. And I bet all of us, can sit here and talk about things that we learned when we were a child and we learned it through a song. I bet most of us on this webinar still to this day, when we alphabetize something, we sing the ABC song in our head, so great things right there. All right, so that's the power of play. So much social development, so much supporting children in the classroom, and it's all done by play. All right, so great stuff going on right there. So I hope y'all enjoyed that little presentation and got a lot out of it.